it is my honor to introduce our guest speaker today, Hyram Yarbro. Hyram has established himself as an influential skincare content creator. He began building his platform in 2017 when he started his YouTube channel and has since grown tremendously. So with this personable, honest, and positive personality, he's attracted a combined total of 11 million followers on both YouTube and TikTok. He strives to empower and educate his audience about skincare, authenticity, and humanitarianism. And also a quick note with the Q&A, if we are requesting to ask non-skincare related questions, like specific skincare questions. So make sure if you do have a question, you can leave it in the chat box, but please be mindful that we won't be asking questions about skincare today. So thank you. So without further ado, we're gonna start our fireside chat with Hyram. Good morning, Hyram. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm so excited. It's honestly so cool to be a part of this. So thank you for having me. And thank you to everyone who's joining and watching. I'm super excited.
Yeah, this has got to be our biggest eLive workshop so far. So we're super excited, but we're just gonna dive right in first and talk about kind of the beginning of your career on when your passion started for skincare and educating the public about skincare. When did that begin?
Yeah, so my personal passion for skincare honestly began through my personal transformation. I had pretty terrible skin before. At 18, I had already started developing like wrinkles, and my friends were coming up to me and they're like, "Hey, Hiram, you should honestly start using skincare," which I'm really glad they did because I was a hot mess. But I started using skincare. I saw the transformative results. And even more so than that, I saw the endless amount of just education and information and knowledge there was to pursue within skincare. And funny enough, I've never been someone who's enjoyed chemistry or science, but the second I started learning about skincare, it was just this fiery passion that began. And I think something that as I started, teaching people about it, I saw that similar passion begin in them, and also the acknowledgement and the growth of self-confidence through taking care of their skin as well. And I initially was passionate about skincare, and then I realized that there was a huge void in the industry in terms of skincare education. A lot of companies were profiting off of consumer ignorance, of trusting that this $100 moisturizer worked without really knowing the functionality as to how or what justified that price point. And people, I saw people blindly purchasing products that they thought would be the best that really weren't. So I started my channel as just a resource to kind of like educate about the basics and just to kind of help people learn like, okay, no, you don't need to spend a lot of money, and here's some ingredients to watch out for. And alongside my audience and alongside working within the industry and connecting with dermatologists, estheticians, chemists, I was able to grow in learning. And my YouTube channel has been a platform to essentially share that educational growth journey. So it's been really cool.
Awesome. So before you launched your career on YouTube and then TikTok, could you talk about some of like the trial and run projects that you had before that? I know you've like published a couple of books, you started a nonprofit. So like, could you discuss those projects and maybe talk about like your biggest takeaways and what you learned from them?
Yeah, for sure. Which I commend you for like even knowing that stuff, because I feel like not many people know about that. You did your research. I love it. Yeah, for sure. So I ever since I was really little, I was always just like an entrepreneur by heart. I was the kid when I was really little, just always trying like new business strategies and figuring out like, how to create things and how to design things. And I just always wanted to be pursuing something. And so my entire life has just been a string of failed business attempts all the way up until I was in college, and I actually started a planner. It's called Innovation Planner. It was a planner for entrepreneurs to essentially better streamline your responsibilities and everything you have going on. As a student at that point in time who was building my own businesses, I understood the difficulty of balancing your schedule and all that you have to do in addition to, working a normal job and everything.
Right.
And so I created it as a resource for student entrepreneurs to be able to use, and started growing that. I, like you said, had also started an endeavor, a nonprofit organization called Selfless Makeup, where I would partner with eating disorder clinics to be able to host events where makeup artists would be able to come and kind of do singular, like makeup transformations in order to help them unlock their ability to see their own beauty, and just a bunch of other pursuits as well. And funny enough, I was really passionately pursuing innovation planner at the time where I started YouTube as well. And I think I was only at maybe 1,000 followers on YouTube. And Innovation Planner was starting to really grow. I was making money off of it. It seemed to be like a good business model. And I started realizing that with my crazy work schedule in life, I just didn't have the time to balance both, to pursue both Innovation Planner and my YouTube channel. And I realized, like, if I really wanted to be successful in something, I had to be fully in. I couldn't, be
Mhm.
halfway in both. So it came to kind of this decision of like, okay, should I pursue YouTube or should I pursue Innovation Planner? And Innovation Planner seemed to be the best route to go, simply because I was already making money and it was growing pretty quickly. But something, I just felt like YouTube was the best thing to pursue. And I really felt like that void in the industry that no one was filling with skincare, and creating content about skincare was going to explode over the next few years. And I think at that point, I was maybe making like $10 to $20 a month off of YouTube. So obviously very successful. No, but I decided to pursue it. And then thankfully, once I really started committing, which was at the beginning of 2019, once I
Mhm.
really started committing to creating content, by the end of the year, I saw pretty explosive growth.
Yeah, that's awesome. So
Thank
back
you.
to, you mentioned that you started your nonprofit and also with your YouTube channel, you've really integrated your career with like service and humanitarianism. So I'm curious, from the very beginning, you've done that, no matter if it was YouTube or something else. So I'm curious on what inspired you to do so. Were you always like that as a kid? Were you volunteered, or wasn't it a specific event that inspired you to lead your career into service?
Yeah, thank you. I love this question. So no, I was not always like that. To be honest, growing up, I would say, kind of rebellious and not the best kid ever. I
Oh,
was very selfish growing up, and I only cared about me and what I wanted. I didn't care about anyone else. And it wasn't until I was in high school that I was able to experience a humanitarian trip. I went to Fiji and Tonga and built a house for hurricane survivors who their homes had been destroyed by a hurricane in Tonga. And I'd say the biggest takeaway, I learned a lot of things about like humanitarianism and what's actually effective and what's not effective, and sustainability and stuff like that. But more than anything, it completely transformed me from someone who really didn't care about anyone but themselves to
mhm,
finding the incredible emotional journey of being able to help others, and being able to empower others you know um with access to basic needs. And that immediately became my passion. And I decided it was more than a passion, to be honest. It was like a calling. And I'm not necessarily very like a spiritual in a sense, but it was definitely something that resonated deep within my soul, to where I felt like, okay, for the rest of my life, I need to be helping people as much as I possibly can, which has kind of bled into every business pursuit, and everything that I've worked on
mhm,
since then, and something that I also wanted to be a part of my YouTube channel, which is why I like to talk about things like environmental sustainability and ethical sourcing and human rights abuses, and how we can help change the industry from the inside out in terms of ethics, and just a bunch of other avenues, and slowly introducing more and more of that, which is what I'm working on right now for my YouTube channel. But yeah, it essentially started that way. And I think for me, I just try to integrate it in everything that I do, because business, I think a lot of times business unfortunately has a reputation of being somewhat self-serving and somewhat
mhm.
solely money hungry. And my hope is to show that you can combine both, um, entrepreneurship and social good together to really ensure long-term sustainability and residual positive change.
Mhm. That's great. So, do you feel that with your increase in success on YouTube and TikTok, that you have like an increased social responsibility? And like, how do you go forth with that? Like, do you have any long term goals in terms of what you want to do with your passion for service and humanitarianism?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I funny enough, I never anticipated YouTube to grow, or just social media to grow to the size that it has, for my presence. It really was like a passion that I thought would maybe get me some extra money for a few years to support whatever new business, entrepreneurial pursuits I wanted to after that. I didn't expect it to grow to the size that it has, but I absolutely have felt an increased social responsibility. And every time I
Mhm.
do make a product recommendation or, do recommend a brand or something like that, I always like to, as much as I can, as best as I can, really look at the values and the ethics of the brands that I'm supporting, taking into uh, thinking about the sustainability of the specific ingredients or the types of packaging or the consumer behaviors and how they're going to interact with certain products. And will that, make a positive difference on the world or make a negative difference? But even more so than skincare, I've always loved skincare. It's my passion. But
Mhm.
um, even more than that, helping others has always been my biggest driver. And I see YouTube as a catalyst for making positive change in the world. And I'm fortunate to be able to have skincare kind of be the thing that has been able to garner a lot of attention towards my personal brand. But what I more so hope to do is really develop that into more of a humanitarian message, social good message. And I'm currently, working on different things and projects and figuring out ways that I can really integrate that messaging into my content even more. And in the future, really pivot my brand and my content to encompass, really significant social change projects.
Mhm. That's amazing. So going
Thanks.
back to the beginning of your career, could you describe a time where you felt stagnant or confused about where the direction of your career was headed, and how did you gain clarity on like, oh, this is what I meant to do, or this is what I like want to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, to be honest, for the first year and a half, it was pretty just like I didn't really know what I was doing. And when um I just didn't really commit for the first, I'd say, like year and a half to committing to creating really consistent, really high quality content. I kind of approached it more passively when I started in 2017, and I didn't really take it as seriously as I should. And it was at the beginning of 2019, like I said, where I committed. It was a New Year's resolution where I was like, you know what, I'm going to take YouTube seriously. I'm going to post like, at least once a week. And I'm really going to start to innovate and strategize how, my content can reach a bigger amount of people. And I mean, from the time I did that, which I was at about 1,000 followers until June of that year, I think I hit like 4,000 followers. And that period of time, I was also working like 60 hours a week at two different jobs, working from like 5 a.m. until like midnight, only getting like 3 hours of sleep a night and just repeating, and trying to do YouTube on top of that, which was a really big time commitment. And at that point, it was really discouraging because I was like, I don't want to complain. I'm super grateful for the amount of subscribers that I have, but like, I don't know how much longer I can take this because this investment it's not really, paying off. And I had gotten really close to a point where I was like, you know what, maybe I should just set this to the side and go back to pursuing Innovation Planner. And
Mhm.
then that was when like it was around summer of 2019. One video like went kind of viral, I guess you could say, and I got like I think like a 15,000 subscribers in like a week or two, and I was like, oh, okay, wait, maybe there's hope for this. And then
The
by
sign.
holding on to that, yeah, then it just got better after there.
Nice, nice. So when you're talking about the period of your life where you were working like 60 hours a week, you were putting even more hours with your YouTube channel. You've talked in your videos that you were forced to drop out of college and your journey with mental health during that period of your time. Do you have like any advice for the audience here? Because I know the majority of us are college students and we're kind of in that grind stage where we're combining, some of us are working like multiple jobs, we're a full-time student. So yeah, do you have any advice for us going through that period in our life?
I think, yeah, that's a great question. There's so many different things I guess I could say to this. I think one of the main things is there's a lot of power in believing in yourself. And I will say I didn't truly believe in myself until I started to see the way that YouTube was growing, and I really started to grasp the concept that wow, something I've created, could actually be, turned into something incredible. And I wish I would have known that sooner. I wish I would have taken, the time to not just pursue passions, not just build opportunities, but truly take the time to really think about my own potential. And I think for so long, throughout that time, and I'm so grateful I did this, and I think every, student who is struggling, or anyone who is struggling, holding on to these ideas and believing in yourself, should do is just to not lose sight of what you're pursuing, because there were so many different opportunities. Like when I had to drop out of school, I had 25 cents a day for food. I was having to borrow money to pay rent. I thought I was going to be homeless. And and then with mental health, just horrible things. And there was so many moments where I was just like, this is just, why am I even bothering? Why am I going after all this stuff? I've pursued so many projects over years, and every single one of them has failed. Nothing is working. Nothing is coming about. Why do I even bother? But for me, it was just, I had to convince myself that I had like a big future, and I had to convince myself almost of this, like, this, not false idea. I guess you could say, I just had to hold myself so closely to a dream that I could not let anything distract me from it. And even though I didn't necessarily completely believe in that dream, even though I didn't necessarily fully understand that I would be, successful and I'd be able to build a career out of something that I loved, just even believing in the concept and blindly trusting in the concept was enough to get me through some of those most difficult moments, and just repeating to myself, like, I'm going to make it. I'm going to make it. It's going to come. I just don't know when. Just doing that for me was really powerful and got me through the most difficult times. And I think that would be the best thing that anyone who is struggling right now, or just has struggled before or will struggle in the future, can do, is just not losing sight of what's the most important to you.
That's really great advice. I hope everyone here took some notes on that. I know I did. Took a mental note. So with the new and extremely fast growth that you had at like the end of 2019 and 2020, how do you ensure your authenticity and all the values going forward? You talked about like humanitarianism and remaining authentic, and just really being honest about the skincare products that you're reviewing and stuff like that. So how do you ensure that going forward as you gain new like stardom and more subscribers?
Yeah, wow, stardom.
Stardom.
I think it just comes down to, for me, it's remembering how I got here. And yes, don't get me wrong, I put a lot of hard work into it, but without the support of my subscribers and my followers, I would still be just at the beginning. And I think what kind of happens with people is that they lose, they start to forget how critical, that relationship, that authentic relationship with their subscribers was in actually propelling them to grow and, become successful. And I think they start to diminish that relationship, or not view, those people as equally as important as their work and the time and invested. And for me, whenever I think about, my content, I obviously think about the work that I put in, but I'm also just like, it's because of my incredible subscribers that got me to this point. They were so critical in this, and how could I ever, like, abandon their trust? And I think in addition to that, I think keeping yourself grounded in certain ways is really good. I still, live in Hawaii. I love it. I still have the same friends that I always have. And at the end of the day, when I think about it, it's like, for example, I still film with my phone. I still just film in my room, just like with a little, like ring light and just like some box lights.
Yeah.
And it's still just a really simple setup. And for me, it feels exactly the same as when I sat down to make my very first YouTube video. And, at the end of the day, you are just, you're just with yourself. And it's the people that have really made this entire journey incredible. And I don't let myself think, it was the reason that all this, sort of thing, type of mentality. It's thinking like, thankfully, my hard work paired with the incredible support of my subscribers, which is equally as important, if not more important, this was able to come about. And I view it as more of like a positive, symbiotic relationship, as opposed to a domineering type of, relationship with my subscribers, if that makes sense.
Right. No, I definitely think one of the biggest things I admire about like your TikTok channel specifically is the reactions that you do with users that just send in like their skincare routines. And like you've consistently done it since like the beginning of your TikTok, no matter like how big you are or anything. And I think it really creates like a two-sided and really like an open community to just talk about skincare with you, which I think is amazing.
Well, thank
So
you.
I would say my next question would be, you're known as being pretty vocal for advocating for like reasonably priced and quality skincare products. I'm curious on, is your target audience like just everyday people, like everyday individuals, or are you simply just like trying to inform the public that like of the myth that a more expensive product, like a more expensive skincare product automatically means that it's going to be a better skincare product?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I'd say it's a little bit of both. When I started really strategizing what my growth was going to look like on my channel and kind of thinking about like, okay, on YouTube, who do I want to be kind of like recognized as? What place do I want to take in this industry? How am I going to be drastically different from everyone else? I saw a lot of creators who were kind of appealing to people who were already very educated about skincare, and for me, what I wanted to do is to create content to people that were brand new to the skincare world. And even more importantly, create content that was appealing to people who had absolutely no interest in skincare. That was the biggest audience that I really wanted to capture, because skincare, I think, should be accessible by everyone. And one of those things is that it should be accessible no matter what your income is. And I worked as a makeup artist at Saks Fifth Avenue beforehand, and I would see people drop upwards of $1,000 on a single skincare product. And it just absolutely blew my mind, because I would see so many people say, well, I want the best skin, so if I need to pay $1,000 for a product for the best skin, then I'll do that. And just the mindset was completely wrong. And growing up as someone who was pretty poor, my family did not have a lot of money, and I thought skincare was something that fancy older women did. So I
Yeah.
didn't think it was something that was accessible to me as a teenager, to me as a young adult, until I really started investing myself in the industry. And so when I started creating content, I was like, you know what, more so than trying to create content for people who are already deep within the skincare industry, I want to create content for people who have no idea about skincare, who don't even know that you can have access to it, that it is affordable, that you can see really good results, and
Mm-hmm.
bring in, so many different people into the skincare fold. And it's been really incredible seeing how that's kind of played out, and the amount of people that have, told me in person or online, like, I don't care, like, I never cared about skincare until I watched your videos, and now I absolutely love skincare. It's been a really cool, journey.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you made the comment about you when you're younger, you assumed like skincare would just be for like older women and stuff. But I've
Yeah.
definitely seen within these past few years, like the younger generation, like specifically Gen Z, kind of getting into skincare and everything. Cause I feel like personally, when I was in like middle school and everything, the only thing that I knew was like Clean and Clear, Neutrogena, and like St. Ives basically. And
Yep.
that's like what my sister, what my friends used and everything. But with this increase of like new knowledge of, oh, there's actually more products out there that's reasonably priced and it's better quality. I'm curious on how you see like the younger generations influencing the skincare, the beauty industries in the future.
Oh, Gen Z is amazing. Oh my gosh, I absolutely love Gen Z, because they approach most things, but specifically skincare, with a new level of critique and a desire to learn as much as possible. So, the previous marketing that a lot of skincare companies have used for the older, like for the boomer generation, it's more so about the luxury, the experience, the fragrance. For millennials, it's more so about kind of targeting the why, and giving a really nice branding story. For Gen Z, it's all about functionality and technicalities. Gen Z, I think, is the first generation that has approached skincare saying, how does this work? Tell me about the ingredients. What does that ingredient
Mm-hmm.
do? How is it actually going to help my skin? Is it necessary? Do I need this? And focusing on really skincare minimalism and only what's necessary for a skincare routine, which I think is really encouraging to see, because it cuts through the marketing that has kind of dissuaded people for so long and led them into this never-ending journey through skincare, trying to find things that work for their skin, and they're not able to find it because they're being sold things from salespeople who really don't, um, either have a deep knowledge of the way that skincare works, or really just don't care about, their client skin as much as they do about making a sale. It's really cut through all of that noise, and Gen Z has been very, critical in a good way about what they want in their skincare products. And not gonna lie, it took me a little bit by surprise. I didn't expect Gen Z to be so informed and educated about,
Mm-hmm.
skincare, but thankfully with my content, I'm very, very picky and I'm very particular, and I like to just deep dive into ingredients. And I think my content really resonated with a younger audience. And funny enough, for the first, 2 years I was making videos, really my audience was like 25 to 35-year-olds. And then now it's primarily teenagers. That's pretty much all the people I ever have come up to me in public, sometimes as young as 12 years old, which I'm just like, wow, why are you watching my
Wow.
videos at 12 years old? I know, but it's surprising how
Starting
often that
young.
happens. Exactly. And they'll be talking about like, the chemistry behind ingredients and, different types of exfoliating acids. And they're literally like 12. It's incredible. But it really encouraging to see, because it's just, again, it's setting a new precedent for the industry and holding companies to a higher standard.
That's really a 12-year-old. Wow, her skin is going to look amazing when she's older.
I know. I'm like, oh, I wish I would have started when I was your age.
So I would say I feel like many of your most viewed videos on YouTube are your like reactions and your reviews, especially to like name brands, popular name brands and celebrities. Like you've talked about Drunk Elephant, St. Ives, Kylie Skin. The New York Times described you as like the content creator that can make or break a skincare brand. So with your unapologetic and honest opinion with like reputable companies and reputable celebrities, do you feel that that's influenced your success and the public attention that you've gained?
I think so. And it's funny, my brutal honesty and authenticity, I thought from the beginning of the channel was going to be the thing that disabled me from being able to grow. I remember having a moment to where I have a truth about series where I talk about brands, and I basically deep dive into the ingredients. And it's like, no matter what brand, no matter what products, if the ingredients aren't good, the ingredients aren't good, and I'm going to call it out. And I remember when I started that series, and I was like, okay, Hiram, say goodbye to any potential sponsorship, any PR, anything, because this is never going to happen, because this is too, like, would be really harsh. And what's been incredible is to see the complete opposite response, to see people respond so positively to my, brutal honesty about how I feel about skincare. And what's even more amazing is seeing how people don't necessarily agree completely with what I'm saying, but that people do see me as a more reliable source of information to be able to help them navigate through the skincare industry. Because I think the beauty industry on YouTube for a long time has had a bad reputation of being like overly sponsored, not trustworthy, and just kind of bought out. So a lot of people are feeling very directionless, because the resource that they had used for a while, YouTube, at least when I started my channel, people were starting to realize, oh, a lot of my favorite content creators are just saying this positive stuff about products because they're sponsored. And I really wanted to fight against that noise, and be brutally honest and hold myself to a high standard of ingredients. And it's been incredible to see the response, both from people and from brands as well, and seeing how willing people are to, engage with my content and positively receive it, which is something I never anticipated, but it's so encouraging to see.
I know it's crazy, because I know a big brand that you definitely emphasize is like CeraVe. And I know every time that I talk about it with my friends all the time, because we've like converted ourselves into that brand as well. But every time you like go to Longs or something, like CeraVe is always out of stock. It's really interesting, which like you've never seen before until like TikTok has started to get big and people have like been getting into skincare a bit more. But so going back to, you were talking about sponsorships. For the sponsorships that you have, how did you first secure your first like sponsorship and partnership, and what are the biggest learning moments, or like what are the things that you look for? Because I know you're probably very specific and you want to make sure that the company is ethical and goes with your values. So what are the things that you look for before a sponsorship?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I am very, 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 very picky about the brands that I work with. I always like to give a, holistic approach to the brands. Like first of all, what are the formulations? Do they have ingredients that I disagree with? There's certain types of ingredients that if I see on an ingredient list, I will just never work with the company because of those. And then after that, I like to look at the values of the company. Like, are they ethical? Are they, promoting the things that I agree with as well. I like to look at the reputation of the brand, if they have a positive relationship with consumers, different aspects like that. And And typically I reject about, I mean, if I were to do a percentage, probably like 99.5% of the
Oh,
offers
wow.
that I get. Yeah. Because like usually from like a day-to-day basis, I'll get like anywhere from like it kind of it's variable, but like 20 to 30 sponsorship offers a day, and I usually take like 4 a month, sort of thing, to give you
Mm,
perspective. So very, very
mhm,
minimal. And I'm just very picky about specifically the ingredients. And then when I approach a sponsorship, I always do it with the precedent of saying that like you will which maybe I'm demanding, but it's more so just like you will fall in line with the content that I want to create, and you have to fall in line with my standards, and you have to be okay with me
yes.
saying this. And there's been sometimes sponsorships to where brands will want me to do like a complete brand review, and I'm like, okay, you got to be ready, like for me to bash some of your products because I really don't like them.
Mhm,
And companies have said that's okay. Or I've even had certain products where I'm like, I personally love this product, but it does have one ingredient that I don't like, and if I'm going to talk about it on my channel, I have to talk about why I don't like that ingredient and how I disagree with that. And setting that precedent, I think, allows for just a new level of, um, transparency. And it also kind of communicates to the brand from the beginning, like, you have to fall in line with, the trust that my audience has invested into me, as opposed to
mhm,
me following whatever you say I should do. And that's not as common within the space. It's becoming more common now, thankfully. But setting that standard from the beginning has really empowered me a lot and made it
mhm.
so much easier to work with brands, because they're more so willing to trust me as opposed to treat me like a commercial sort of thing.
Right. Definitely. Boss moves right there. Oh, that's awesome. So,
Thank you. I try.
so could you describe some of the like surprisingly unglamorous parts of the business of content creating and maybe specifically the skincare industry?
Yeah, great question. First I'll say skincare community, and then just overall. Skincare community, as much as I love the pursuit of education, there are a lot of people out there who think that they know everything when they learn a little bit about skincare. And because they worked at a Macy's counter for a certain amount of time, or because they took one class or something, they think that they are the all-knowing God of skincare information. And a lot of people think that like, if I disagree with your opinion on skincare, that is a personal attack on you. And this sounds like normal internet culture, but within this skincare industry, it's like, it is a whole another level. I think people just love kind of, I don't even know. They really like feeling like they're the number one expert once they learn a little bit about skincare. And I think one of the challenging things for me has been learning how to cope with a lot of the backlash. Thankfully, I've gotten so much love and support, but I think when you grow really quickly, you also have to deal with a lot of hate,
Mhm,
and it's a lot. It's trying to get used to like entire websites and blogs being dedicated to like bringing me down and talking about how much they hate me, and the death threats and all this kind of stuff just over skincare ingredients is just kind of like, wow, this is a little ridiculous. But thankfully I feel like I'm at a point where I just kind of like most of the time shrug it off, and I've realized that it's more of a reflection of their negative perception of the world than it is a reflection
mhm,
of me. And so long as I'm operating morally and ethically, and I'm doing the best that I can, and I'm focused on education, for me, that's enough. But I'd say another unglamorous part is, I don't think people quite realize how much work it is. It's and I never realized how much work it is. It is absolutely insane. Mia, who's attending, she's watching. She has seen my work schedule, and it is just all over the place. Literally, just hectic. Just go 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 go, busy constantly. And sometimes it is one of those things to where it's like, I have not had any free time in like so long. And I think one of the challenges, um, you know, growing really quickly on YouTube, don't get me wrong, is amazing, but it's one
mhm,
of the most stressful things ever, because you're kind of, once you grow to a specific level, you're kind of expected to be a specific level to be able to handle everything. So having, your teams of lawyers and your teams of financial advisors and taxing agents and management teams and assistants and everything like that, you're expected to kind of have it already together because you're getting approached by all these big companies and all these, news stations and everything like that. When in reality, you haven't had any time to be able to process, first of all, the growth, but second of all, how to deal with what's happening, how to delegate tasks, how to do any of this. And it goes from 0 to 100 way fast. And it's really overwhelming. So because of that, it's a lot of work. And I think, with a lot of people, it seems like it's really easy to just like upload a video, but typically it's about 10 hours of labor per video. And, during quarantine, when quarantine started, I was doing 5 to 6 videos a week. So, just that, let alone the other projects and, the business stuff that's also in development and press and different things like that. It's a full
Sounds like a lot.
consuming thing. Yeah. But it's
Yeah.
also like the coolest thing ever. So even though it's not glamorous, that's not to say it sucks, because I love it.
Yeah.
I love just all the new challenges and the new learning opportunities.
It definitely keeps you on your toes.
Yes, a lot.
So you've talked a lot during this interview about your personal brand, but for those that are looking to find their personal brand, whether they might be like confused of where they are in life about their career, or maybe just like knowing what their values are, could you give any recommendations on like young adults and college students who are currently like looking to find what their brand is?
Yeah, definitely. I'd say one of the biggest things that I see when it comes to people trying to develop their own personal branding is that they see people who have been successful, whether it be on YouTube, social media, or just with businesses. They see other people who have really been successful by developing their own branding, and they mirror it almost exactly. And I think that's one of the biggest downfalls to your own success, is trying to be, it sounds cliche, but trying to be too much like other people who are, successful in the space. I see this on YouTube all the time, to where so many people are, they want to be a beauty YouTuber or something like that. And they want to be a makeup YouTuber. So they start doing makeup tutorials, and they start acting and talking and doing the same types of tutorials and videos like their favorite creators. And that is exactly what is disabling you from growing, because what will appeal to people more about you than about that creator, and then about the 10 other people that are mirroring that creator's habits. Or it could be with a business too. It's the exact same principle with a business. If you're doing something exactly the same, or very, very, very similar to someone else, you're not unique enough to be able to draw a new consumer base. And I took the risk when I started to be just completely different. Like, I saw people making skincare videos that were so professional. It looked like studio production. Everything had like perfect swatches and close-ups, and it was just beautiful. And then I was just kind of like, okay, no, my videos are going to be poor production quality. I'm going to cuss like a sailor. I'm just going to be my own personality. I'll be hyper and random. I'll do funny face edits and whatever, because that's my personality. And I was like, I just want to be completely different, and also just want to be myself. And I think that's one of the greatest things you can do for your own brand, just being so completely different from everyone that's in the space, while simultaneously filling a void. I think it's good to avoid oversaturated industries and find specific niches that you can closely align yourself with, so that you can occupy 100% of that space, as opposed to 0.00001% of an oversaturated space, because you're so much more likely to attract a new type of consumer and audience base by being completely different, and finding how you can make your content or your business as appealing and entertaining as possible, to be able to draw in new people who maybe weren't even interested in that in the first place. Draw people in and be able to, like I said, occupy 100% of that space. I personally think that's the best thing you can do, and also the thing that I see most people failing with.
Yeah, that's really great. Thank you for that advice. It's super helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think that concludes our fireside chat. We're going to go into the Q&A portion. So for everyone in the audience, if you have a question, please send it in the chat. And yeah, we'll be dedicating the rest of this fireside chat just questions from the audience. We'll maybe take a couple seconds to.
Yeah, so if you guys have questions, please go ahead and type it in the Q&A function in Zoom, or the chat feature in Zoom, and then we'll relay your questions over to Hiram.
So from Giovanni Martin, he asks, what skills did you develop early in your career?
Okay, great question. I'd say one skill that has been like so important that I never anticipated for it to be as valuable as it is a kind of a base level of graphic design understanding, knowing how to use things like Adobe, like Photoshop and Premiere Pro and different things like that. Thankfully, I learned when I was younger, but just having a base level of information has been so valuable, and I cannot imagine operating any business without some level of like design knowledge, because it really has helped me specifically with YouTube, a visual oriented type of industry. So I'd say from a technical standpoint, there was that, but I also think from a YouTube standpoint, learning how to combine entertainment and humor with informative content, I saw as one of like my biggest strengths within the industry, but also one of the most difficult things to do. If anyone has watched my videos, I try to make them as like entertaining as possible, so that I'm taking a somewhat boring topic like skincare and making it funny and making it really entertaining so that you're laughing and you're enjoying the experience. And while it does seem kind of natural, it's really difficult to do, and it took like a lot of practice at the beginning of learning how I could combine like the entertaining kind of fun part of my personality, my random part of my personality, while also pairing it with helpful information. And I think and from what I've seen on YouTube, other creators that have been exploding in growth have utilized that same strategy. And I think it is kind of like a muscle to developing it. But once I started to develop that early on, I still utilize that, to this day. And I think it's been one of the most valuable things in my personal branding.
Great.
Hey, Hiram. So our next question is from from Ashley. What has been the best or most impactful moment so far in your career?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a really good question. I mean, I will say probably it was when I hit 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. And it was because at that moment, like I knew YouTube just could, I wouldn't have to work. I could just fully focus on YouTube. I wouldn't need to, work the jobs that I was working before. And I think, and it was the first time I really grasped the concept of like, oh my gosh, like I'm successful. Like I made it. I'm able to do my dreams. And I think for me, I had a really, dropping out of college and seeing all the opportunities that were available to me through college and then not being able to access any of those. And I also had to go through an experience where I was disowned by my family, and that messaging saying that you're never going to be successful, that kind of stuff. Really, I didn't realize how much it played a just negative part on the way I perceived kind of my future and a little bit of my hopelessness. And reaching that point when I hit 100,000 subscribers, I literally like ran down to the beach from my house, which is like a mile away. And I was just like bawling my eyes out. But I was just like, oh my gosh, I think I'm successful. Like, I think I made it. I think, I am someone. I get to pursue my dreams, and I don't have to worry about, like all the things that I worried about when, having to drop out of school and all that stuff. And even though I've had incredible opportunities since then, like the growth and, being able to talk to some of like my idols and my favorite people, I think that moment was definitely like the most impactful, and the first time I ever like saw my own potential and saw my own kind of what I had, grown and developed. So it was pretty cool.
Thanks, thanks, Ashley.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Ashley.
So Amber asks, what is the biggest adversity you faced that has turned into an important life lesson?
Ooh.
Big question.
Yeah, I love that question.
Yeah.
I mean, kind of what I was saying before, probably, because this is just referring to life in general, not even specifically business. I will say probably being disowned by my family was a pretty difficult thing, because going from an environment where I grew up on a cattle ranch in the middle of Arizona, so it was like way out in the boonies, like you weren't around anyone, so like family was everything, and wanting to pursue my dreams and wanting to help people around the world and do humanitarian work and everything, and being rejected for those goals and dreams was pretty difficult, and definitely was very, very challenging psychologically. But I think it taught me such an important principle of just being unapologetically me and not letting anyone dissuade the way that you perceive yourself and your goals, and not letting anything, change what you're going to pursue. And I think most importantly, like being careful and being selective about who you let into your life and who you let influence you, and only surrounding yourself with the best people possible. I think that experience really taught me, like, I don't want to deal with toxic people. I don't want to deal with anyone who even has an inkling of a negative effect on my life because of how much it affects me, and how much that can kind of like hurt my drive and my spirit. And it really taught me to surround myself with the best people possible. And I think because of that, that ended up being a huge role and a huge impact in, me being able to get here in the first place, but me, first of all, even, surviving this long, sort of thing. It's been an incredible, lesson that I've learned, that honestly, I'm so grateful that I went through all of that, because I just would not have been as strong of a person had I not gone through that. So good question.
Right.
Love that one.
Yes. Thank you, Amber.
Hey, Hiram. So our next question is from Kale. He says, "Hi, Hiram. As a fellow content creator and entrepreneur, your story is awesome and very inspirational. So thank you for that. I know you talked about how you pick sponsorships in terms of company values and morals. What advice would you give to content creators when it comes to revenue negotiations with sponsors?"
Great question. And I wish I knew more about this when I first started. So first of all, congrats on being a content creator. That is amazing. Keep going. It's literally like such a booming industry. So just keep pursuing it. But I'd say knowing your worth is really important. And I know it's difficult to kind of know your worth when, say, you're a smaller content creator, because you're trying to like gauge like what your value is based on what other people are charging and everything. I think, give a fair appraisal of how much you should be earning per hour for the amount of labor and work you put into something, because I understand making videos, making content is so much work and it's so taxing, like just mentally, and take the amount that you think you deserve per hour and charge, and estimate the amount of hours that you're going to be working for that, and charge the company that, just as a good starting point. But more than anything, do not let brands guilt trip you into a lower rate. That happens literally all the time. Doesn't matter how big the brand is, they will always try to guilt trip you and devalue you and say like, oh, we're a small business, or we're, this kind of stuff. When in reality, if they're reaching out to you, it's because they have a marketing budget and because they're looking to use you as their marketing strategy. And any smart business has a marketing budget set aside, and you need to know your own value, and more than anything, the amount of time that you're investing into something for them. And then finally, I'd say, at the beginning of your career online, that's when you should be the most picky about sponsorships and PR and things like that. One thing that I kind of regret a little bit is like being overly excited about getting PR when I was a small creator and creating content completely surrounding getting PR, which I was excited because I'm like, ooh, I get a free skincare product, I'm an influencer or whatever, and creating content for the company, when in reality I should have been charging for the amount of labor and the amount of time that I put into that. And keep in mind, you have a very small but a very trusting audience, and breaking that trust from the beginning will just hurt you in the long road and can really set a reputation among viewers that could be negative and could really affect you like years later. So be very particular, know your worth, and do not let brands guilt trip you into lowering your rate.
Thank you, Hiram. Thank you, Kale.
Thank you, Kale.
Hi, Hiram. So the next question is coming from Tiana. Tiana says, you've always started out being so authentic to yourself. Was there ever a time that you felt like or considered straying away from that or following everyone else to avoid any hardships?
Oh, yeah. I mean, specifically with YouTube, it's been interesting. I have had, brands approach me with very, very, very lucrative, opportunities, things that where, it's, like 6-figure deals, in exchange for saying, just like a single video or two talking about a product that I haven't liked in the past, but are trying to pressure me to now like it, because they're paying a lot of money. And at those moments, you kind of really are like, okay, whoa, this is the moment. Do I cave to this? Do I, go after what so many, people always talk about, like the money and everything, or do I stay true to, what I've always believed in? And the amount, I mean, I'll be honest, I've turned down millions of dollars worth of deals just because of this. But nothing is as important as the trust from your subscribers and your followers. That is the most important thing. And when you think about the sustainability of your brand, it's so sad to like put a cap on yourself. And, because in reality, if you're accepting, like for me, like I picture, if I'm accepting a deal for a lot of money short term, I'm losing the trust of my audience long term. Or I could cultivate a positive relationship and trust for a long term and reap the benefits from that while being ethical and being moral, so that was kind of like a situation to where I was like, have been situations where I'm like, oh man, okay, I don't know. And you feel like sick to your stomach. Yeah, sick to your stomach. But at the end of the day, I don't regret that. It's the reason why I'm able to still have such a, trusting audience. It's been great.
Yeah, that's so inspiring. Thank you, Tiana, for that question.
Yeah, thank you, Tiana.
Thank you, Hiram. So first off, I want to thank everybody for throwing their questions in the chat. Fortunately, we're heading towards the tail end of our live event with Hiram. So my last question for Hiram would be, Hiram, I feel incredibly blessed to have seen your transformation into the person who you are today. And in fact, we were in the same room when you all pitched us on the innovation planner. And I could probably say you're super authentic since day one. My question to you is, if you had a chance to run into Hiram 5 years ago, what would be a piece of advice that you would tell him?
I'd say, don't be so terrified that your dreams aren't going to come true, because they will, and they'll happen sooner than you expect. But don't be so fearful of the future, I guess I would say. I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs can probably relate to this. One of your biggest fears is like everything that you've put all your time and energy and invested into, that it's all going to come crashing down, and that no matter what you do, you're always going to be a failure. Has always been a big fear of mine. And, like I said before, growing up with project after project after project, just failing, and trying to like stay strong through it all and keep believing in yourself, there was a point where I was like, okay, maybe my worst fear is coming true. Maybe nothing I do will be successful, and maybe I really do just have to settle. And so I'd say, don't be so scared, but don't feel that you need to settle. Keep pushing, but don't be so fearful, because you're going to reach your goals, and you're going to, figure it all out, sooner than you think. But there's no need to live in such fear of possible failure. And I'd say, like, for, just for anyone too who's concerned about that, because I felt that fear, and I feel like a lot of people also will feel that fear. So long as you're passionately pursuing something, and you're always innovating, and you're always figuring out how you can improve yourself and improve what you're working on, you will reach success. It is inevitable. It's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of how long it takes, and to not be so hard on yourself as you go through that journey. And just keep pushing. So that's what I tell myself.
And on that positive note, that's going to conclude our event today. We're going to extend a warm aloha and mahalo to Hiram for joining us today. Once again, we'd like to thank First Insurance Company of Hawaii for making the speaker series possible, and IBC, and especially Ila, for co-hosting this event with us today. Join us next week for our Entrepreneurship Live event with Dina Tierney from Pacific Point. And again, from all of us here at PACE, we are sending all of you our best wishes, and please stay safe and enjoy the week ahead. Mahalo. Thank you, Hiram.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you, Hiram.